Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and I'm here with Heartbeat's Vice President Cindi Boston and a couple of her guests that we'll hear from in just a moment. Now, we're recording this episode on the Friday of Heartbeat International's annual conference, where Cindi, along with so many of our friends in Pregnancy Help around the world, are gathered in Birmingham, Alabama to learn from workshops, listen to keynotes, attend networking events, and just be together as we celebrate the theme of Together Towards Tomorrow. If you'd like to check out some of those workshops and keynotes, I'll add a link to the show notes, as well as some information on how you can join us in 2026. All right, Cindi, thanks so much for being here, and tell us who you've brought on the podcast with you today.
I am here with Ben and Elizabeth. They have flown all the way from California with their little sweet Evelyn, and they are here to share their story. I think the most impressive thing I've heard from them so far is that they wanted to be able to share their story so other moms and dads had hope, and so that our sponsors, those who stand alongside Heartbeat International, can hear the story that they've made a difference in the lives of Ben and Elizabeth. So we'll get started. Ben and Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Miss Elizabeth, here we are. We're kind of going back in time with you, and I'm just so curious to hear where your life was when the bulk of your story began. What was life like for you before you found out you're pregnant, and then work us through your relationship, how you met?
Well, I was born and raised in Chico, California. And before I met Ben, I was just kind of aimlessly floating through life. I really had no direction of what I was doing. And I was pretty unhappy. And I applied at Costco, and I got a seasonal position folding clothes, and I was thrilled. And I was not expecting anything from it. And I met Ben working at Costco.
That's a great story. So this romance began budding at Costco.
Yeah.
What a fun story that is.
Mhm.
So how was life during that time? You guys were together for a while. And then tell us a little bit about how that relationship developed, and just give us a glimpse into that.
Well, I thought Ben was handsome, and I thought he was really nice. And Costco's really fast paced. And so I needed help with different things and figuring out how to work the baler and crush the boxes and do different stuff. And no one would help me. Everyone's just busy in their own life. And Ben is just a fast paced guy and a hard worker. And he was really always willing to help everybody.
Oh,
So he was my go-to guy for all my problems.
so he came along and supported you. What a great guy. He showed his true colors right then, didn't he?
Yeah. And I remember I invited him over for dinner at my house, and we just hit it off from there. I think one member of my family was like, "Oh, so you think you like," they call me Bitsy in my family. Like, "Oh, so you think you like Bitsy?" And Ben was like, "Yeah, I sure do." And they were like, "Well, you don't know her yet. Give it a little time." And Ben stood up and was like, "Hey, you don't have to take that. We can leave." And
Oh,
yeah, he's always stood up for me.
that's such a great story. We all need somebody who will defend us and who will stand with us during the rough times. And it sounds like your relationship has been that tried and true. Well done. Tell us about how you felt. You found yourself pregnant at some point. Tell us how you felt, how that impacted you. It's a tough thing when you're not expecting to be pregnant. Tell us about that.
Well, Ben and I had a year-long relationship, a little over a year, and it was a really fun relationship. We traveled a lot. We did a lot of things. We went to Hawaii, and he proposed to me after 6 months, right in front of Bernie Falls, in front of the waterfall. And we were having the time of our life, but it was a lot of rise and fall, as far as finances became an issue. And, he has children from a previous marriage who I love, but there's a lot of custody stuff going on with his ex-wife. And, his other family members are very heavily involved in his life and have strong opinions about him having a new relationship after his divorce. And I think all the mounting pressures of everything became too much and we went our separate ways. Um, and it wasn't until he moved out and got his own place and I didn't plan on seeing him anymore. I think he felt the same way. And that's when I found out I was pregnant with, his child. And uh, I was excited. I was excited and I thought the world would share that sentiment with me. And I wasn't met with the reactions that I was anticipating. Um, I've always been a free spirit and I've always been, really outgoing and, somewhat promiscuous. And I do comedy and sometimes it's vulgar. And so I think the people around me have never envisioned me as a mom. I've never envisioned myself really as a mom, but I always hoped. And so, especially with the breakup between Ben and I, my family was not thrilled to hear we were going to have a child. But personally, I was excited. And then when I shared the news, I don't know if it was the way I shared it or just the shock of, me being pregnant, but I got a lot of feedback, especially where I live in California, being pro-choice. Everyone was like, why don't we revisit this in a couple years? I don't think you should have this child. And Ben wavered back and forth. We argued, and every argument went back to, well, why don't we just end this pregnancy? And so it was a really uncertain time. I had trouble working. It was all I thought about.
Sure. It's a difficult place to be when you're not feeling support. And one of the primary things that we find at our pregnancy centers, medical clinics, adoption agencies, and maternity homes is the fact that having someone stand beside you during that time is the most crucial key. And it sounds like you felt like you were missing that at that very moment with your family. You didn't come from a family of faith, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said earlier to me yesterday, you said something about I didn't really have a core from which to make decisions.
I did not have a moral compass as far as any kind of guiding way to make decisions. I just went where the wind took me and whatever felt right in the moment.
Right.
And it led to a lot of regretful decisions in my life.
Well, I think we've all had regret. And the fact that you didn't have that moral compass, I love how you say that because we all need that. Faith grounds us. It gives us the parameters that really make our life so healthy and really protect us in many parts. Now, Ben, I want to bring you in on this conversation. What was going through your mind when you found out you were pregnant? I'm sure it was a variety of emotions. You were fresh out of another relationship. You had been together a long time with Elizabeth, but you still had other things happening. What was going through your mind when you found out you guys were expecting?
I was excited about it at first, and I was hopeful, but the fighting it kind of wore on me and our decision, and I, like Elizabeth was saying, that we wanted to have the baby, but we didn't know if we were going to be together.
Right.
So being in the legal system, I was already in the legal system for custody and for my other two kids, and it's taxing.
Yeah.
It's hard, and I talked it out with Elizabeth, and I'm like, do you really want to go through this system?
Right.
And we'd be good for a while, and then we'd fight, and then we good for a while, and then we'd fight again. And during those fights, we're like, we'll just get an abortion because I can't see this working out. And then we'd be good again. And it's like, oh, let's have the baby.
Oh, that had to be so hard for both of you.
Very back and
just
forth.
that back and
Yeah.
forth. Well, and you didn't really feel the support from anyone about the decision and about the relationship. So it's understandable. You guys were just really in a place of difficulty and uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't make a good ground for making a decision.
And I would like to add, I haven't talked about this, I don't think, in any of my speeches, but we explored all options. We really did. I talked about adoption. We had talked about Ben signing over his parental rights so I could just raise the child without having to deal with him. And then just mounting fears and doubt that, maybe I would have a child and then I wouldn't want to give it up very often. Or what if Ben wanted it at the last minute and then I just screwed myself out of motherhood and then he gets a baby and or it gets adopted into, a tragic situation. And so, I mean, we really went back and forth constant. And I would say several times a day, we were like going back and forth of how to handle this.
So you've given us just this visual of there was just this feeling of some chaos within your lives at that time. And it's understandable. We see it all the time. And you had to get to a place where you could move forward. What was most pivotal as you made your decision? At the end of the day, the mother's the gatekeeper. And she's the one who is um, the final decision maker in many regards. I do love how you all have connected and did your very best to try and get to a decision together. But then at the end of the day, what was the pivotal part of the decision?
Well, the options kind of came down to sweep it under the rug with abortion and just move forward as our lives as we know it, or have the baby. I mean, when it came down to it, those were the two options. And so, we both agreed that we liked our lives at the time. And so I went to Planned Parenthood and took the first pill. And Ben texted me at that moment, maybe 1 minute after I'd taken it, and told me he wanted me to get out of there and that he loves his other children. He's never met anyone that regretted having children, and that no matter how we felt about each other, that we would be happy with our decision to have a baby. And to be honest, I was very mad at him to be a minute too late when we had months, working up to that. But I would say that's the moment that we came together because I always wanted the baby. I just I knew I couldn't do it alone. And that was when we really teamed up and decided to do everything we could to stop what we had put in motion.
What was the abortion clinic experience like for you? We get a variety of stories, but we do hear a lot of the same kinds of things. When you walked in, what was the environment? Give us a visual of how that felt when you walked in, how they worked with you in the process. What was that like?
Um, I was reflecting on it last night, and I feel like it would be inappropriate to say that I felt pressured to have an abortion by Planned Parenthood because I don't think that is accurate for my story. I think I just felt a lack of support.
Oh,
Going in there, it felt like a DMV. The ladies at the desk were talking about their lives and smacking gum and whatever, and they're just like checking in for a procedure, and I'm like yes, and they called me back in a room and they sat me with the pill and I was very emotional and I could tell that the lady sitting there was used to that, but at the same time really unclear why I was so, and she's like, hey, it's a bunch of cells, it's not a baby yet, this happened several times, it's normal, I've had one, you're gonna be fine. And I just found it odd because from being pregnant and sharing that experience with people, I felt like a lot of people had abortion stories. And when they would tell them, they were very affected by it. But going in the clinic, it was like, it's abortion day. It's not a big deal. Let's take this pill. Let's get going. And so, I felt like I was kind of a factory line, appointment, just the next hour slot appointment.
Wow, that's it's a good visual for us. You didn't feel pressured, but you felt a lack of support as you were in that facility. And that is helpful for those of us who are in the work. As we're creating an environment, having that warmth is so vital. So you took the first pill. What happened next?
I received that text from Ben, and I immediately, they give you a bottle of water, and I immediately chugged the entire thing, and I ran into the bathroom, and I tried to make myself throw up. And a member of the clinic staff actually knocked on the door and was like, "Are you okay? Are you throwing up? You can't throw up. It's very important you don't throw up." And I don't even remember my dialogue back to her if I even said anything. But I made a plan with Ben to meet him back at my house. And I was very unclear what I think is mifepristone is that first pill. I was very unclear what that was at the time. Um, because, they gave me a little rundown of, hey, you're going to take the first pill and that stops everything. Second pill gets it out. And, it's very like run of the mill, kind of like when you get a flu shot, what you might expect, a little achiness, whatever. And so I wasn't sure if I had taken poison or, and so Ben and I met back at the house. I was hysterical. He was trying to console me, and we were frantically Googling home remedies. Maybe I can have some special tea with honey or, some kind of combination. And we talked about calling poison control, and maybe it was on page 2 or 3 of Google. Ben found the APR number.
And wonderful. So tell me about the experience of calling the Abortion Pill Rescue Network. What was that like?
It's actually, part of it is a little bit funny because Ben was really wanting me to call, and I thought, honestly, I thought it sounded hokey, but we were so desperate at that point. And so I called, and a lady answered, and she was like, "Thank you so much for calling. I just have a few questions. You're so brave." And then she asked me, where I lived, how long ago I had taken the pill, and I'm just snotting and crying all over, and she was comforting me, and I pulled the phone away, and I went to hang up. At one point, she's asking me all these questions. If I had insurance and I was allergic to any medications, and I pulled the phone away to hang up, and Ben said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I think she's going to ask for a credit card." And because I thought it was a scam. And Ben said, "But she hasn't yet." And he pushed the phone back up to my ear. Um, and she said a doctor in my area would contact me. And, I think she said within the hour. And it was 15 minutes. We received the call.
That's exciting. So that was a hopeful moment, Ben, and you showed great support. And I mean, a relationship is difficult when you've got crisis going on and you're having to make this life-altering decision. And, you guys were going through it, but then you stood by her and you kept the hopeful train going. What was that moment like as she was talking to that APR nurse and you guys were making those arrangements to see the doctor or talk to the doctor?
I was scared, but I was also hopeful. I was really praying that this was the solution and the remedy that will help us save this baby that we just decided to save, and I was nervous, but I had to be strong for Elizabeth and not show my fear and anxiety to her, and just be that rock for her.
That is awesome. So you got the medication, you started the reversal process, um, and then you were referred to a pregnancy center near you. Tell us about your experience with the pregnancy center.
So the pregnancy center that we got referred to it's about 25 minutes away from our home in the neighboring town. And it's uphill. We live in a valley. And so as we were making our way up the hill, it was a silent car ride. And I think Ben, if I remember right, I was crying, and Ben was just, he had his hand on my hand, and he just kept telling me, no matter what, it's going to be okay. I'm not going to leave your side. And as we went up and went in, I remember opening the door, hoping I could kind of just sneak in and, I don't know. I was crying a lot and I didn't want a lot of attention. And we opened the door to a line of women, which is very not what I wanted at the time, but it is what I didn't know I needed. They were all there and they were teary-eyed and smiling, and they were all welcoming and told me I was brave, and they were proud of me. And at the time, I didn't understand that because I could tell it was a faith-based place pretty immediately. And I was confused by the fact that they were proud of me because I had just gotten an abortion. So, but yeah, these women, they were strangers of the time, and they were all giving me hugs, and they took me back, and I wanted to immediately just do the sonogram and see if my baby was okay, but they wanted to talk a little bit. I had to do some paperwork, and they had to ask me a few, I think, medical questions as well. And I met the doctor and everything. And to be honest, that time is kind of a blur because I was already mentally like preparing to find out we had lost the baby. And so I really was not in the moment with them. And they took us into the sonogram room and laid me down, and Ben held my hand, and we saw that our baby had survived. And I think next to her birth, it was the best moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. And you were surrounded with support at that moment.
Yeah, and it was very shocking to me how affected these strangers were by that. I mean, the tech was crying, and I don't even know everyone who was there because they were all so excited. I was the first APR client to call in my area.
Oh my goodness.
Which I didn't know at the time that it had gone live, I think 4 days in our area before I called. So we all bonded in that moment.
That's incredible. Now, Ben, you were able to benefit not only from what happened with the support during the abortion pill reversal that happened, but you also benefited in preparing for your role as a new dad, and even your role as a man with a life.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to have a great life, and you took advantage of some options they had available. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I mean, in the beginning, I heard pregnancy center. I'm like, that's just for the women. It's.
Right.
I mean, I went into the center up in Paradise, and I sat in the lobby, and I was just kind of waiting for Elizabeth and the staff to do their thing, and then we'd leave. But I got called into the room as she was having the sonogram, and it really changed my outlook on it. I could see how much Elizabeth was doing to save this baby, and all these other nurses and staff members, and I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be more hands-on during the pregnancy. So I asked one of the staff members what I could do to kind of prepare myself to be a father, and they directed me to these Bright Course classes, and I took that and I ran with it. I have done over 200 parenting courses.
That's amazing.
And
That's great.
It gave me all this information to be there for Elizabeth during the pregnancy, the labor. Now that our daughter is a little toddler, throughout that whole phase, and even with my teenage children, I just soaked in so much information that they gave me.
And it was great too, because I feel like I was in panic mode the whole time. I was constantly worst case scenario. Every time that I didn't feel the baby move for a while, oh, she's passed away, or and I think from what I hear, that's moderately normal. But I was just, and I would even tell Ben's other children and my mom, I'm like, and Ben constantly, I'm like, if I die, don't hesitate, get in there, get her out, save her. And I just always was in full panic mode with the hormones and everything. And Ben knew every step of the way what was going on with me. I had nightmares, night terrors, and different things. And he's like, "Oh, I've been reading about this. You're fine. This is normal stage where you're at." And it was so comforting to have someone who knew more than me about what was going on with me.
That's amazing. What a testimony to just preparing and saying yes to your future in a way that helps you be the dad you want to be. I love how you made that investment, Ben. And Elizabeth, you made a lot of difficult choices along the way. But I know you have an amazing life now. It's not perfect, I'm sure. Although you got a pretty great one. What's life like now? Evelyn is she like 18 months?
15.
15 months. And she's this darling little, she looks a little gingery. She's this darling ginger child. I have one of those. But tell us what life's like now.
Well, I would like to say I'm happier than I've ever been. And I never thought I would be. If you could look back on especially old commentary from me on social media and stuff, I was really anti-children and I had no problem constantly making jokes about it, especially in my stand-up. I'd say, "Oh, I'm so sad I don't have kids." And I'd wipe my eyes with money, and I'm like, just kidding. It- you know, and I prided myself in working and being a female in leadership role at my work. I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I'm so fulfilled doing it. I love it. And Evelyn is just such a joy. I don't have a lot of bad days because she's right there. And I do have to mention, to do justice to our family and friends, abortion is a topic that it's easy to push it when you don't know the baby. But my mom, who was not supportive of us having a child, and Ben's mom as well, our great grandparents, my stepdad's very involved, my brother and sister. So everyone in our life adores our daughter. And it was all the people who were pushing us to get an abortion in the beginning.
Wow, what great support they are now to you. And we see that a lot where parents panic too. They panic for their adult children and they want the best for you. And they can't always see that clearly. But what a gift it is to know that you have been able to have that support. Then any final words about your lives now?
I'm just very proud of Elizabeth. She's such a good mom, and she made it through the whole labor and delivery without any medication. I'm super happy about that.
Highly don't recommend it.
She was so strong, but Evelyn is just an angel, and you saw it last night. She just walks into the room and everybody just, she's a very happy girl, and it's definitely made our life complete.
She's alive on 70% attention, 30% food.
Yeah.
Well, she was commanding the audience last night, and we had grown men crying with your story. And that's always a good sign because we can get hardened to life and how things play out. But the reality is your life's played out. God had a plan for you, and you didn't know he had a plan. You didn't even know him at that point, but you found faith. And you've really spoken to the aspect of how wonderful a pregnancy center is, how Heartbeat International, being that initial phone call, answering that for you, supporting you from the very first words that were said because you needed support, and we delivered on that. Any final words?
Yeah, I would like to add, having Evelyn has been the highlight, definitely of our relationship. But having her didn't solve our relationship issues. The pregnancy center up in Paradise, they gave us relationship counseling, and we got mentors and people, introduced to us that I don't think, would have ever thought to reach out to personally. And through all of that, we've come together and, we found that when I have an issue with Ben, I don't go vent to my friends, and then they say, oh, screw that guy. We lean into each other and I voice it and he understands me. And I think that's been a huge part of it is we can't have a child together if we're not a partnership. And that is been brought to us.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. We all have a story. God created a story planned for us. We don't know what's coming, but you've really surrendered your life not only to that strong faith, but you've said, I will make you a priority to each other. And there's no better strength than that in a relationship. And you can tell your sweet baby Evelyn, she is solid gold, and it's because she has a safe, healthy environment. So thank you for what you do. As parents,
We were hugging this morning and then we looked over and she was smiling and it was so cute.
so wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to another podcast soon.
Thank you, Cindi and Elizabeth and Ben. Just so grateful that you could share your story with us and that we could bring this message to not just those at the conference that you shared it with the other day, but also those who are listening to this podcast. And if you found this story inspiring and you would like to spread the word to others of the amazing work of the Abortion Pill Rescue Network, please share this episode and subscribe to the podcast. We will constantly be bringing more content your way of news from the Pregnancy Help Network and for those serving in pregnancy help ministry. So with that, I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.